Hi, welcome back to the first video lesson of 2025. This is on learner-centeredness. Let's take a look at our journey. So first, we're going to be talking about the difference between the lessons, if it's teacher-centered or student-centered, what happens exactly there. Then we'll focus on a few key principles of student-centered lessons, and then at the end, we'll be talking about practical ideas, right? Practical applications in the classroom, okay? So, if in the first workshop, you saw that teachers can have many different roles, right? A very common role that teachers have in the classroom is the instructor. It's the teacher who boards, right, while students copy. So guys, I'm going to write down a few things here. Please copy in your notebooks. Or the teacher talks, the students listen. The interaction is very limited. Maybe the teacher asks individual students a few questions. The students answer individually. So this is a very common type of lessons, and it's very effective when you think of lectures, when you think of talks in conferences, for example, and also in video lessons, because there is limited interaction here. Then I am the instructor, so I talk and you have to listen, right? There isn't really much an interaction. What happens though is that in our regular schools, in our classrooms, the interaction doesn't have to be limited because the students are right there in front of us. So we have to manage this in a more student-centered manner. And so the teacher goes from an instructor to a facilitator. So students have a more active role. It's not just listening or taking notes, copying something, but actually doing something more actively. Students then make decisions. The teacher speaks less and listens more, right? And the interaction permeates the classroom. So what happens is that from student-centered teaching, the student-centered teaching shifts the focus from the teacher delivering knowledge. Because if you think of the instructor, the teacher is the primary source of knowledge, right? But the student-centered classroom shifts this idea. The teacher is no longer the only source of knowledge, right? Then students in the student-centered lesson, the students actively construct their own understanding of something, right? It encourages collaboration, it encourages critical thinking, autonomy as well, right? So let's take a look at this summary. In a student-centered lesson, the teacher talks most of the time. Can you guess what happens in a student-centered lesson, right? The students actually engage in something more actively, like discussions, activities. It's a more hands-on kind of thing. In a teacher-centered lesson, the lessons follow a strict plan. There is very little room to any flexibility, let's say. But the lessons adapt to our students' needs, right? So think of it. We all know teachers who have been not just English teachers, any teachers in general, who have been teaching the same topic the same way for the past, like, I don't know, 10 years, right? Without considering how our students act in the classroom. So depending on my students, I have to adapt the lesson according to their needs as well, right? Teacher-centered lesson, the teacher asks and answers most questions. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Students ask and answer each other's questions in a student-centered lesson, right? If you think of assessment, this is not exactly the focus of this video lesson, but let's just consider or reflect upon this a little bit. Because it's so teacher-centered that the only kind of assessment that we have is tests and quizzes, because it's something like very top down, let's say. But in a student-centered type of lesson, or our assessment includes other things like projects, discussion, self-reflection, even things that are not really that are not really connected to a teacher-centered idea, right? And so to sum up, like if you don't remember much of this video lesson, but you remember this two sentences, that will be this. In a teacher-centered lesson, the teacher explains, the students absorb. And again, nothing wrong with that if you're thinking of a lecture, of a video lesson, things like that. But in a student-centered lesson, which would be the case for our regular schools, right? The students discover and the teacher guides. It's a different type of rationale, yeah, if you think about it. Now, we're not here to vilify teacher-centered lessons. That's not the point, but the point is to reflect. How can I go from a more teacher-centered approach to focusing more on my students? This is the main question here that we have to answer. All right, we'll be talking about a few key principles in the next video. I'll see you there.